Section 5, the long decline, so that kind of gives you a bit of a clue as to what the book thinks in terms of whether Rome fell or endured. The long decline leads us to believe that the book's impression is that this is a long, drawn-out process. So the overarching question here is, how did military, political, social, and economic factors combine to cause the fall of the Western Roman Empire? So again, that's another little clue. You know, why not all of the Roman Empire? Why are they just talking about the Western Empire? So by the end of this section, these are the things you really should be able to do or know or explain or demonstrate. How and why the Roman Empire was divided. Describe how waves of invaders contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. Reconstruct the various types of problems that led to the fall of Rome. And then compare the differing views on the kind of downfall Rome experienced. So that would be that discussion question that I posted. The other thing is, how do belief systems and religions shape society? And the big thing with that is just to be able to explain how religions and belief systems impact societies. What role do they play? Why is it that we do some of the things that we do because of our religion and our beliefs, or the laws that we write, those types of things. So if we look at the long decline, it's important to realize that the fall of Rome is a combination of internal problems and external forces. They don't have a lot of control over what other countries do outside of their own country. They do have a bit more control on the things that are going on within their country. And so we'll look at some of the responses that Rome had in terms of these internal and external threats and problems, and hopefully you can kind of see how successful or unsuccessful they were. So the Roman Empire divides. Political violence is becoming fairly common. The biggest problem here is the problem of succession. They really don't have a method, a plan, a way to decide the next emperor. It's not by election. Even though hereditary rule is a bad idea in my opinion, at least you know that the oldest male heir in most cases, or the oldest female, or the only surviving relative, even if it's a third cousin, they're the ones who are going to become the next emperor. It's not a great solution, but it's a known solution. The problem with the Roman Empire is there is no method. Even drawing a name out of the hat would have been better than what they had, which is whoever kind of rises to the top, whoever is able to bribe, whoever is able to kill the one emperor and seize control. There's just no way to decide who becomes the next emperor. So because of this, you look at this 18-month period. There's 4 emperors in 18 months. Over a period of 50 years, there's 35 different emperors. Only one of them was not killed. Only one died of natural causes. This is a really hectic and chaotic time. And the other problem you have is with this random adoption, someone seizes control of power, someone kind of bribes their way to the top, whatever it might be. There is no legitimate power. No one really picked you. No one really supports you, so you don't have a power base. The other thing is it really erodes at the public confidence, because for the general public, they wonder, well, what is the Senate for? Isn't the Senate supposed to pick the councils? Isn't the Senate supposed to pick the emperor? What are those bozos doing up there? Are they doing anything? So you have all kinds of problems going on, and the Romans really start to doubt their uniqueness, their greatness, and they start to lose faith in their government. The only real authority is the support of the Praetorian Guard, and that is the army in Rome. If you want to be an emperor for even a brief period of time, you better have the support of the Praetorian Guard. So besides the fact that there's no real method for choosing an emperor and a ruler, Rome is going through a series of social and economic problems. The empire has grown so big, and the army that's needed to defend it is so large. And they're at the point where they're not expanding anymore, and they're not really bringing in the riches from all these conquered lands, and their treasury is starting to get depleted. So the only way they can really generate revenue is through high taxes, and that's going to cause the prices of goods to skyrocket. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to make it so that those wealthy people are really going to start kind of leaving Rome because they want to avoid these high taxes. At the same time, you see farmland. Farmland has been overcultivated. They don't rotate crops. Of course, they don't know anything about rotating crops. They don't use any kind of fertilizer. They plant the same crop over and over and over again. And over a period of 100 or so years, more than that, several hundred years, the farmland is just depleted. It's out of nutrients and it's not producing food like it once was. Farmers are forced to kind of leave their farms and they go to these latifundias, these huge estates out in the countryside, and eventually that's going to evolve into serfdom, which we're going to talk about a little bit later down the road. So faced with this problem, we see two emperors, Diocletian and Constantine, who are going to try and reform things and fix things. And the first person we're going to talk about is Diocletian, and you can see how Diocletian divides the Roman Empire in half into a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. The reason Diocletian splits it in two is it makes it a little bit easier to manage. So instead of one person having to manage all of the Roman Empire, you have two different emperors, one who's in charge of one half, one who's in charge of the other half. The other thing Diocletian does is he fixes prices for both selling and buying, and so that's going to deal with this runaway inflation. He's going to pass laws that force farmers to stay on their lands, so that way you still have people growing crops and you don't have these large groups of unemployed farmers wandering around or going to latifundias. He also passes a law that sons have to go to work with their dads and learn a trade at a very young age. Constantine does two major things that are going to impact future events. One is his acceptance and toleration of Christianity. It's going to make it the official religion of the Roman Empire, and it's going to enable Christianity to last regardless of what happens to Rome. He also moves to a new capital. He moves from Rome to what was Byzantium, and he renames it Constantinople, and today Constantinople is Istanbul. And one of the things you can see is the reason I threw in this little chart is Constantine takes over roughly about 300, and so you can see what happens to the number of Christians after the year 300. It skyrockets in a period of 50 years. There's a couple different factors. One is the Roman Empire is really starting to fall apart and is starting to erode, and so people are looking for something to believe in, and Christianity offers a hopeful message and something to turn to. But the other thing is with Constantine's endorsement of Christianity, there is no more turning Christians into martyrs and throwing them to the lions, and that really helps. For external threats, these invaders, there's a whole group of invaders, a whole series of invaders that are going to sweep through and really disrupt things. The Huns are by far the fiercest. And because the Huns have such a nasty reputation, a lot of these Germanic tribes like the Visigoths, they don't want anything to do with the Huns. And so they start to flee when they hear the Huns are in the neighborhood. And they cross over a couple of rivers that traditionally have been the borders between Rome and the Germanic empires. And once they realize that Rome isn't there anymore and Rome isn't as tough as they once were, they travel further and further into Rome, and the Visigoths are the first ones to sack Rome. They get to the city of Rome, they steal some of the wealth, they steal some of the treasure, they destroy things, and they just generally disrupt things. Attila the Hun looks like he is going to do the same thing to Rome. The Pope goes out to meet Attila, and for whatever reason Attila turns back. And there's lots of speculation as to what happened there. And no one really knows. You got a couple different stories. No one's really sure. The only thing you do know is when the Pope went out and met Attila, Attila turned back. The last one to come in, at least while the Roman Empire, the western part of the Roman Empire is still around, is Odoacer. And Odoacer is the guy that kicks the last Roman emperor. Odoacer is the guy that kicks the last Roman emperor out. And after that, a lot of historians say, at least from the governmental perspective, Rome no longer exists. The western part of Rome doesn't. And so in your book, you have this events that changed the world. And all this does is it shows you a timeline of events, of these different outside attackers that come in. And you can also see the path of the Huns, and then you can see just this general disruption as all these Germanic tribes go throughout. And so you have this invasion of the Roman Empire, and you see that the western part of the Roman Empire is overrun with invasions. The eastern part of the empire is relatively safe and peaceful, at least compared to the western part. So this little graphic shows many of the problems that caused Rome to fall. It is back in the review section of your book and in your chapter. And here are the pressures. You've got military ones, the Germanic invasions. You have a weakened Roman army. You've got the political, the economic, the social. And you can see that all the weight of these things are pushing down on the two pillars, and it's causing it to break and crack. And so these four main problems and then these underlying problems are just overburdening the Roman Empire, and they just can't keep up to the pressure. So then ultimately the question is, did Rome fall? And again, this is debatable. There isn't a right answer here. There isn't a wrong answer here. The book suggests, and I would tend to agree with them a little bit, that the Roman Empire and its influence is going to last long after it's gone. The Byzantine Empire picks up the tradition of the Roman Empire, and it's going to get known as the Greco-Roman world because it's going to keep on the trajectory and the tradition of the Greeks and the Romans, and they're going to be around up until about 1500, so they're around for a long time. If you look at the people in Italy, life generally stays the same. So even though the Roman Empire isn't there, the Roman people are still there, their culture is still there, their society is still there. Latin was a widely spoken language. It continued to be the language of education for a long time. It was the language of the church. As a matter of fact, Roman Catholic masses up until the 1970s were spoken in Latin. Legal terms, medical terms, political terms, those are all, not all, a lot of them are in Latin. If you look at Capitol Hill, that comes from the Capitoline Hill of Rome. If you look at the designs of our buildings, the Capitol building in Des Moines is structured and designed like a Roman building would be. Most of the buildings in Washington, D.C. are based on Roman architecture. Roman laws and the premises of Roman law and the Roman Republic is the basis of our law and our republic. And the other thing you see is the Germanic tribes blend their cultures with Roman cultures to create what's going to become the Germans, what's going to become the French, the Spanish. And so a lot of Northern and Western Europe and even Southern Europe, all of that gets blended, and you can trace a lot of your Germanic language, the English language, all of that is traced back to Latin. So in a lot of ways, the Roman Empire is still alive and well in some regards today.